Most news outlets remained silent when Tara Reade, a former Senate staffer for Joe Biden, alleged that he sexually assaulted her back in 1993, which his campaign strongly denies. The New York Times ran a detailed account last weekend, 19 days after Reade went public. The Washington Post interviewed Reade starting last year, but did not run a story until the day after the Times piece. Times editor Dean Baquet says if his paper was going to cover this story, quote, we needed to introduce it with some reporting and perspective. He says the sexual misconduct allegations against Brett Kavanaugh were treated differently because he was already in a public forum in a large way, while with Biden, on the verge of becoming his party's nominee, they weren't, again quoting, in a heated race with the clock ticking. Joining us now from New York, Buck Sexton, a former CIA analyst who now hosts the Buck Sexton podcast, and in Los Angeles, Leslie Marshall, the talk radio host and Fox News contributor. Buck, Tara Reade actually has more corroborating evidence than Christine Blasey Ford did when she made her allegations against Kavanaugh to the Washington Post back in 2018. Both the Washington Post and New York Times interviewed a friend of Reade's who says she was told by Reade at the time in 93 about the alleged attack by Biden, yet both papers waited nearly 3 weeks to publish. Your take?
This is one of the most egregious instances of the double standard that we see from major papers, notably in this case, the New York Times, but Washington Post would do the same thing. And there's no justification for it, which is why when you had Dean Baquet of the New York Times interviewed about this, I mean, the justification was laughable. I mean, no serious person would ever think that Joe Biden is not, as he's running for president of the United States, as much a public figure as really any human being on the planet. So the idea that was put forward for why they delayed just shows you that there was a bit of panic, because we also have to remember, not only, as you said, is there greater credibility to the allegations that have been leveled by Reade than were about Blasey Ford. Blasey Ford couldn't even prove that she had ever met Kavanaugh. That was never proven. She had no way to corroborate that bit of information.
All right.
But beyond that, the standard that they established, Howie, was that if there's even a sense that you could be a person who was guilty of this during the Kavanaugh hearing, you should step down. The country deserves better. Democrats have no way of grappling with that standard now.
Let me get Leslie in. What do you make of Dean Baquet saying that, well, because Kavanaugh was up for a Supreme Court seat, it was urgent, and Biden, yeah, he's running for president, but there's no ticking clock? What did you make of that explanation by the Times editor?
I understood what he was saying, but I honestly, myself, before he even gave his explanation, I would have said, well, COVID-19 has taken up, pages 1 through 12, commencing in March. I mean, I think that is a valid reason for one, delay, two, that you have to interview everybody. But I was very surprised, and I wasn't happy about the delay with both the New York Times and the Washington Post in reporting this. Look, I have a journalistic background, and the job of a journalist is to report the facts and let either the viewers, the listeners, or in this case, the readers make their own determination. And that's what I want to do as a reader. And I think all readers of anything, New York Times, Washington Post, anything else. And it's their job to investigate and put the facts out. I don't think you need 19 days to do that necessarily.
Right. But Leslie, does this put liberal women in the media in a difficult position? Many of them have not exactly jumped on this the way they did with Brett Kavanaugh, with the allegations against Roy Moore, with the allegations against candidate Donald Trump. Do you see a reluctance there?
Look, I'm a feminist. I'm a Democrat. I'm also the victim of both assault and rape. So I know what it feels like. And I know what it feels like to have somebody accuse you of lying. It's disgusting. Women, whether Democrats or Republicans, need to be women first. And I see hypocrisy on both sides. There are people that didn't believe allegations against Bill Clinton back in the early 90s. There are people on the right that didn't believe Christine Blasey Ford. Because I can speak from this experience myself, I always start off believing the woman, but then I do my own investigation and I do look at the facts that are there, because sadly, Howie, although the overwhelming majority of individuals out there are telling the truth when they come forward, there are times, a couple of percentage of the time, 2% of the time, where somebody may not be telling the truth. And especially we see that in politics. And I don't think investigations left or right are unwarranted.
I didn't know that about your background. Thank you for sharing that. Buck, both the Times and the Post stories did interview two former top Biden Senate staffers who said that Tara Reade never complained to them about the boss, as she has claimed. And with the Washington Post, reports that she changed her story. At first she said, well, Biden touched my neck and shoulders, and only more recently, when she was backing Bernie Sanders, by the way, did she describe a full sexual assault. So there was reason for some caution by these news organizations.
Well, those news organizations didn't show any willingness to take into account. I mean, remember, we're talking about fundamentally the double standard here. I mean, I think Leslie, for example, was outlining what should be the standard, and I would agree with that there can sometimes be people who bring false allegations. That is something that always needs to be. Look, this is fundamental to our justice system, and the media changed that standard very clearly, and we all remember, we're all quite aware of what it was when it was somebody who was going to be a Republican appointee to the Supreme Court. You mentioned Donald Trump. And now this time around, it's all changed. I mean, when we're talking about skepticism, which is what you're bringing up, Howie, from media outlets about the allegation, that's a new thing for them, it seems, when we compare it to what was going on with Kavanaugh. So it's really about looking at how the standard has shifted so very, very conveniently. There was contemporary corroboration for Tara Reade, telling some people at the time she didn't know Biden. She was in enclosed places with Biden. She did work for Biden. There's nothing about her story that seems like a fabulist is telling it. That is not the case, by the way, not just with Blasey Ford. There were two other women who came forward, one of whom was clearly lying about Brett Kavanaugh.
I get clearly unsubstantiated allegations were reported. I got to jump in. Dean McKay also said there was what's called stealth editing of a sentence after the Biden campaign complained. The original sentence said the Times found no pattern of sexual misconduct by Biden beyond the hugs, kisses, and touching the women previously said made them uncomfortable. That second part was cut out. Last question, Leslie. I've got half a minute. Still today, even after these two major papers have weighed in and made it safe for everyone else, no mention of this on CNN, no mention on NBC and ABC. How does one explain that?
Again, from a journalist perspective, there is no explanation for that. You have to report the facts and let your viewers, in the case of CNN or the other major networks, make their determination. And there are going to be biases. We all know that. We come to the table with our biases. There are the allegations. There are numerous allegations against the president, and people who support and love the president choose not to believe those. And I'm sure there are some in the Biden camp that feel the same way with Ms. Reade's accusations against the former vice president as well.
All right, stay put. Right after this, there are a whole lot of people endorsing Joe Biden. Remember, there's a presidential campaign going on. Is anybody paying attention? That's next. It's been all but overshadowed by certain other news, but Joe Biden has finally picked up some key endorsements, at least on video, from his rival Bernie Sanders, from Elizabeth Warren, and from Barack Obama. Buck Sexton, Barack Obama saying he'd run a different race in 2020 seems to be his way of backing a more progressive agenda for his former vice president and Bernie Sanders supporters. But in terms of media attention, here's the former president of the United States, a 12-minute video. Was it pretty much drowned out?
Right. Well, to borrow a point that Leslie made before, I mean, obviously anything that's going to get through the COVID-19, all the focus on that right now is going to be tough. And I think, Barack Obama putting out a long video like this, everyone feels like right now Biden is the last man standing. And so it's not really anything it almost feels like this is a default move by Obama. And so whatever he has to say about it, it's not really clear that it moves the needle all that much for Biden. And I think that's true on the Bernie side as well. We'll see what Bernie supporters think.
Yeah, Leslie Marshall, you can just imagine what a huge story this would have been, all these endorsements falling in line if we didn't have a coronavirus pandemic. And yet it seems the media, fairly or unfairly, have kind of marginalized Biden because he's a candidate. He's the leader of the party now, but he doesn't have any formal role in battling the virus.
Well, look, first of all, COVID-19, right? That takes the front seat. Biden, these endorsements take the back seat. Two, I'm never a big fan of endorsements. I really don't see endorsements moving the needle much anytime, any race for anyone. Three, puts to bed that Obama wasn't going to endorse Biden. But here's the problem. What the endorsements can't do, Howie, is they can't get the enthusiasm that Joe Biden, in a sense, is lacking as a candidate compared to Donald Trump and his base. And in In addition, if Bernie Sanders can't get the voters to come out and vote for him, how he's going to get them to come out and vote for Joe Biden. And also, Obama comes out with this video, much loved, and I think because of COVID, it took a while to trend on Twitter. So I don't think that these endorsements by Elizabeth Warren, Senator Sanders, former President Barack Obama are going to do much for the former vice president.
I agree that media way overplay most endorsements, but it might help with fundraising. Washington Post feature, Buck, says the following, that Biden, who's been doing a lot of TV interviews from Delaware, is shrunken down to the size of an iPhone screen or a panel in a Zoom chat, and the candidate has never quite seemed so small. Fair or unfair assessment of the virus situation?
Well, I think it is fair if you're just looking at the optics of this. I do think that the media's sense that Biden is looking like he's just nowhere near. Of course, the president, the incumbent, always has a big platform advantage. That's never going to change. But in an era when you can't do normal campaigning, and who knows when that's going to change, you are just seeing this guy in his basement. I mean, it looks like bloggers and podcasters and the rest of us all across the country who are stuck at home. There's no grandiosity to Biden. And so really it feels like his only hope for the campaign is if there's a major change here in the ability to get out there, see people and talk. Who knows if that will happen? And Trump's doing his 2-hour press conference every day. You know, love it or hate it. I know some people feel differently about it. It's putting him out there, and he looks like the commander in chief.
Yeah, you can't ignore it, as you say, love it or hate it. I've been podcasting from my house, Media Buzz Meter, and now we're all on the same level. Finally, Leslie, some pundits are saying maybe this helps Joe Biden because it makes the election into more of a referendum on the president's performance in handling coronavirus. LA Times column in your city says Joe Biden is stuck in his basement. It just might help him win.
I think, quite frankly, when you just look at the way our country is before COVID, during, and even after, God willing, soon, COVID, it's going to be a referendum. Look, Trump has his base. The people that love him are going to vote for him. The people that don't and hate him aren't. We're not looking at those people. We're looking at that sliver. Will that sliver like what he's done or not? I don't think Joe Biden needs to be in his basement for that determination, but I do think he needs to get out there as much as possible, be interviewed by as many radio shows. Come on your show, Howie, and every network that he can, because quite frankly, the president has a couple of hours of free advertising and campaign rallies right on national television due to COVID every day.
All right, I'm inviting Joe Biden right now if he wants this platform. Thanks to both of you, Buck Sexton, Leslie Marshall. Good conversation.